if you're there right now, seriously, take a week off, go to the lake, have some fun, maybe drink some beers. I don't know. Reset.
Sounds like a real life scenario, right?
We may be going to the lake this weekend.
Yeah, we're going to the lake this weekend. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Coaches on Couches.
Being very slouchy.
Extra slouchy today. But today we're going to talk about the infamous double peak and the mid-season transition period.
Yes.
Pretty important.
Very important. So if you've been suffering from some lack of motivation, today is your episode.
Fitness
we're
plateaus
gonna kind
and
of
lack of motivation.
dive into that.
I am Coach Dale Sanford.
And I am Coach Bryant Funston. We are the co-founders of BPC Performance Coaching, where we specialize in helping time-crunched athletes optimize their busy schedules so they can maximize their athletic performance. Every BPC coach is trained in our 5 pillars coaching system that has been developed over the last decade through our work with athletes of all ages and ability levels, from fresh off the couch to world championship competitors. You can find out more about BPC by going to buildpeakcompete.com, checking Facebook and YouTube at buildpeakcompete, or all up on that Instagram at BPC Performance.
I was a little slow on the...
I felt like I was reading pretty fast today.
That was pretty good.
After reading books to my kids at night, I'm getting pretty dialed in on my quick reading.
So a couple of little housekeeping things. Save the date.
Whoa, we're getting married!
Big announcement. That's not true.
Not us.
Yeah.
We're already married.
Yeah, not to each other.
Not to each other.
Not that that's a bad thing.
To our wives.
Whatever. So save the date. We are going to be doing a long course specific training camp targeting those late season 70.3s and full distance triathlons. That'll be September 6th through the 8th. I know the image is probably a little dark. September 6th through the 8th. This year, we're going to be in Huntington, Tennessee. Beautiful Huntington. Home of the Dixie Triathlon. And
home of the that sweet 1,000-acre lake.
Yep, we're going to be using. We've got permission to use the 1,000-acre lake up there, and we're going to have our good buddy Kirsten Sass along to help us coach this camp. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
This will be our first long course camp like this.
This will be our first triathlon.
We've been talking about it for a long time, but
literally 10 years. We've been talking about putting on a triathlon camp. And it just has never worked out. We don't really have open water in Memphis to use. The ones we do, they've said no.
Yeah.
So this is the first one that's actually going to happen. So don't miss it. Second, we've got our youth running camp.
Yep.
Starts next week. It'll be June 25th through 28th. Always a blast. If you haven't gotten your runner signed up, do it.
Yep, all the details are on our website.
All right, so we'll get to it. We'll move right on to shout-outs.
Shout-outs! Yes!
Love them.
Love them. So this past weekend, big weekend for the road racing community here in Memphis. Very close by, Jackson, Tennessee, is the Rockabilly Grand Prix. So that was this weekend. A lot of good results for our athletes. I'll just start firing through a few of them. Lee Rustin stepped on the podium in both the road race and the time trial, 3rd place in both of those. So congrats to her. Adam Ferroni, 5th place in the Cat 4 race in a tight pack finish. So congrats to him. I know you got a few from Rockabilly.
Heather Nichols in the women's category 4-5 or 4 race, 2nd in the road race and 2nd in the time trial. So great result there. And then Greg Rohde, first road race ever
We can now officially call Roadie a Roadie.
Yeah. First official road race and time trial combo. So I guess you could call it. Wasn't really an omnium, but doing 2 races in one day. And our good buddy Kirsten Sass, who we just talked about, took the win in the ladies' race, time trial, and the road race. And we have to give
funny
a shout
side
out.
note on Sass. So I'm in the breakaway I was in as we're riding by one of the guys, Justin Lowe, who rides with Sass quite a bit.
Yep.
Sass was already solo by that point in time. He goes, well, it looks like Sass is being antisocial again, off the front by herself. I was like, yep, she tends to do that. She actually is social.
She was smiling the whole way.
She was smiling.
We have to give a shout out to Matt Joyner and Mark Yoshida for putting heck of a massive amount of time into putting that event on, and it's always really well run smoothly. If you haven't done the Rockabilly Grand Prix and you're considering bike racing or you are racing bikes, I mean, get out there next year.
And something else, like whatever area you're in, even if you're not like, Rody, that was his first actual road race. We had quite a few first-time road race folks. Get out and support the local events, because if you don't support them, even if it may not be your discipline, get out and support it, because if you don't, those race registrations go a long way in making sure these events happen year after year. So if you want racing nearby, get out and support it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it.
I got one more. Tony Gambrell,
All right.
second age group at the Indianapolis Sprint Tri. And he was going to actually double up that weekend, but weather was pretty crappy. So, but he rocked it out.
We do have a couple more. Dads.
Shout
out to dads.
Shout out to all the dads this Sunday.
Yep.
Father's Day.
I guess we have to give a shout out to Tulsa. Congrats, Tulsa.
Boo.
On your...
We're getting ready to show Iron Man how fickle we are here in Memphis.
Yeah. But, shout out to Memphis for putting in a good bid for that event. But
for those that aren't...
to see what happens with the new Ironman Tulsa in 2020. So that's part of the next segment.
That is.
Are you ready for this?
I think we're ready.
We're putting in a new segment.
It may just be for today.
It may be the one and done, grand opening, grand closing. And we're going to just call it, huh?
I'm calling it, what the huh? Huh?
Because we're really just going to talk about stuff that is confusing right now to us. And right now, for me, it's kind of what Ironman's doing right now. They're shutting down Boulder, which I'm guessing it's because of participation numbers, but you would think that of all cities in America, Boulder could handle or could keep a full Ironman running. Yeah. And with good participation. They're keeping the 70.3. And it kind of moves along into like they just filed the SEC for an IPO to raise $500 million. And it's not just Ironman. That's the whole, their whole
sport network
business side of things. But Ironman being the largest revenue in their mass participation part of that. It's just weird that they would do that all while getting rid of races, bringing on new races, and they're actually launching more races in China and kind of over in I think Indonesia and stuff like that.
Bali? I'd do a Bali full.
It's just, I'm confused as to what they're doing right now. Especially with I read some of the SEC filing, and they're putting a weird tiered shares for the an A and B shares for the IPO, where the shares that are reserved for people that are close to the Wanda group, the Wanda family, get these shares that have 4 times more voting power than anyone else.
The super shares, huh?
Yeah. So if
interesting.
Yeah, it's just weird. I'm confused as what they're doing right now. It's just kind of, you got anything that's kind of, we talked about old Froomy there.
We did. This is a spoiler alert if you haven't been following up on your Criterium de Dauphiné, but I guess it's not really a what the huh, because anything can happen. But old Froomy pre-riding the TT course on a descent, going 60K an hour, decides to
blow a snot rocket,
take a hand off, blow a snot rocket right as a gust of wind comes and takes him into a wall at 60K an hour. Broken femur, elbow,
that's bad.
ribs.
That's bad. We wish him the best, but
yeah, I was kind of looking forward to seeing whether he could get 5. I'm personally not a big Froome fan.
Yeah.
But I was curious to see. I think that the tour is shaping up to be one of the best in recent years, I think. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there you go. That's all I got.
All right. Let's get on to the main topic here.
Diving into it.
So we're going to be talking about the double peak format of training. So Brian, why don't you go into like what double peaking actually is?
Yeah, essentially there's kind of two ways I guess there's multiple ways you can go about looking at how you're going to structure your season out. But one thing that we like to do here in the Mid-South, especially with the heat through the summer, is going to more of a double peak. So instead of trying to hold fitness for a super long period of time, or having just one goal event at the far end of the season where you're constantly kind of building towards that, what we prefer doing, especially with our athletes, is let's pick an event that's kind of earlier season, maybe ends in May time frame or thereabouts. Kind of build everything up towards that, and then go into a secondary build, kind of get back to the basics, and then target later season stuff.
Yeah. For a lot of triathletes, it ends up being like, especially if you're doing long course. Around here, a lot of people sign up for the late season long course races because of training in the heat and stuff like that. So a lot of times it ends up being like a build up to an earlier season 70.3 transition, and then we get back on the build for late season full distance or another 70.3 or whatever.
Yeah, I guess the big thing is not making every race your peak race that you want to have good fitness at. Yeah. And instead actually picking 2 different times a year, separated by at least a couple months, preferably a hair longer, to have 2 different peaks in your program.
Yeah. So the big reasons for using this, we kind of went over them already, but like it's impossible to hold fitness for an entire season. I mean, especially for us, we're like in cycling, season can start as early as late February.
Some do it in January.
You want to go
some places
to Texas,
it's January.
Yeah.
Some places it's year round. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and then bike racing pretty much, or road racing pretty much finishes up in late September. Yeah. That's a long season. The triathlon is early, like April-ish. Yeah. There are some races in March and stuff like that. There's some races in February, but all the way through November. Yeah. Ironman Arizona is later November. That's a long season to try to build and hold fitness.
And don't get us wrong, we thought it was achievable. When I first started riding and racing, I was like, I want to be on form for every single race I do. Yeah. And I want to do a lot of races. I'm going to do them all year, all season long. Got to get my upgrade. And I found that it didn't work out too well.
Well, and especially in the case of a triathlete where you're literally doing, we'll just say double the number of sessions, not workouts, but double the number of training sessions that most single sport athletes are doing. Whereas a cyclist probably rides 6 days a week or so, a more competitive one, 6 days a week. So 6 sessions, couple of strength sessions, 6 to 8 sessions a week. Whereas a triathlete is doing, anywhere from 9
11
to 12, so it's, it's a lot to stay focused on. It's a lot to work around. It's just a little bit more difficult to manage, which is why a lot of people get into triathlon and then go single sport, or vice versa. They'll move back and forth as their life allows them to do, more training.
Yep.
But most people can't hold fitness, and they can't stay mentally focused for an entire season.
Yep. Yeah, one of the big things we found is once you start doing that really high intensity stuff, the stuff that gives you that last kind of bump, that last jump in fitness. Once you get there, like if you get there in, say, April, because racing's starting in April for you, and you try to keep that same high level of intensity going all the way through August or September, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
The body burns out. You get that plateau. You end up seeing this decline, this drop off in fitness, usually in conjunction with a motivation decrease. So if you're someone who's demotivated right now, or if you look back on previous seasons where you kind of hit a spot where you're like, I don't want to ride, I don't want to go do those intervals, I don't want to go. There's a good chance motivation's tied pretty closely in with your body and whether or not you're overtraining. So listen to that lack of motivation.
Yeah. And a lot of times, that hits at a specific time of year for a lot of people. And that's kind of what we picked up on over the years. And that's why we started like pretty much forcing everyone to use kind of this double peaking format. The other parts of it is, like you said, it allows you time to go back to building base fitness and skills and technical ability that start to kind of fall off once you get into doing race efforts, group rides, like all this stuff that we talked about in the past, like how when the race season starts, you can start to see like the weekly TSS falls off because everything turns into a race effort. So it's either on or off, so you're not getting those big training stresses from like long rides, longer group rides, or those really long, like tempo efforts that just disappear when the season starts.
And if you think about it, those are different energy systems that you need to be working. Like cycling and endurance sports in general are a very aerobic based sport. You think about it's the hard effort that's 60 seconds maybe that gets you dropped in a race or in a group ride. But for the general, like if you break it down, the big bulk of your effort is actually more on the aerobic side of things. So neglecting that and not training that, and it's easy to do. I mean, once you get into race season and hard group rides, I mean, it's fun to go fast.
Yeah.
But you end up neglecting other areas. So this provides you with an opportunity to go back and kind of work on the things that have been neglected, and not be stressing as much about trying to hit your super hard, not so fun workouts.
Yeah. And realistically, it's, for most people, it's better for your family life because there is like this dead set area where like, or time of year where your training is going to back off again for just a little bit.
Yep.
And a lot of people find it really convenient to like schedule their vacation in that time or stuff. And then they have a really good excuse to actually enjoy their vacation.
That's the key there. Yep.
And time with their family and all that kind of stuff. And, and not have to be overwhelmed with training during vacation or anything
not being
like that.
all stressed about it. Yeah, for sure.
Or you plan this vacation and all of a sudden you're stressed out because you're not going to be able to train, and you're in the middle of a training block, and you think this 1 week is going to just destroy your entire training cycle.
Yeah.
I think the big thing here, one thing we do have to say is that this double peaking format has to be planned ahead.
Yeah.
If you're somebody who flies by the seat of their pants as far as their training, this will not work for you.
Doesn't work as well, for sure.
What usually happens is that peak or that transition period, which we'll talk about in a second, comes anyways in some way, shape, or form. It's forced.
Illness, or which really isn't an actual transition, but
you don't want a forced transition.
Yeah.
So like it has to be planned ahead, and the way we always do it is we take those 2 goal races. And we work backwards from them, and that the time right after that first goal race turns into a transition.
Yep.
And we'll get into the transition here because that's such a huge part of this double peaking, format. But from there, whatever type of periodization or training block schedule that you use will be then put in between those two races. So since the transition period is such a big part of this. We have to kind of go into more deep into what that transition is. And we had an entire episode on like end of the season transition. The season's over
Yeah,
now.
Final goal's done. Now what? Yeah.
Yeah, but this is a little bit different because we're in the middle of.
I think this one's harder.
It absolutely.
This one's harder to wrap your head around as an athlete and as coaches, getting our athletes to wrap their head around it, but actually forcing yourself not to do anything or very little. So low impact, short duration, no intensity. Like think of it as like a total like reset of body and mind here. And basically you're just trying to clear all the fatigue, mentally refresh yourself, and make sure you're starting back on a good note as you start moving forward. And it's something it's tough to do because you always feel like, I'm going to lose so much fitness if I don't do anything. But we've had great success in keeping athletes motivated through the course of a long season just by doing a 1 week. You can do 1 or 2 weeks, but just by doing a 1 week kind of a refresher thing.
So we're talking basically a mental and physical recovery right after a goal race. And usually it's like 1 to 2 weeks. Usually if it's like a marathon, a marathon probably a 2-weeker, unless you have a bunch of stuff already coming up. Full iron definitely 2 weeks. Half iron about a week or so.
Yeah. And a lot of it's going to sort of depend on how far away that next
race
goal is. So if you've got 3.5 or 4 months between goals, definitely like a 2 week. Some people may find you have to shorten that up to 1 week if you've got something 8 weeks away or something.
And if you've come off like a really big goal race, like you're probably as fit as you've been all year.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take a solid they say like 5 days before like detraining really starts to happen. So like if you're just doing like a 1 week transition, we always say unstructured completely. Like as coaches, we just, to some people it may look like a cop out of your coaching, but our direction is the coaching. It's saying do nothing.
Yep.
If you don't feel like
very
training,
little, yep.
Don't do it.
Yep.
Like for at least the first, 4 or 5 days. Do whatever you feel or don't feel, but if you feel like training, keep it short, keep it easy, keep it low impact.
Yep.
That's the basis of transition time.
Yeah, so like a perfect example here is I had my athletes who did the Dirty Kansas.
Yep.
They've got a secondary goal that's coming up pretty quick, early August. So there's not a lot of time between. But the week after Dirty Kansas, it was far more days off, like forced days off, just so when they saw that, they weren't thinking, it's an optional. I can go ride if I want to, or I can take up running on my transition week, which would be a bad idea. And the only like rides that I put on there were like 45 minutes, easy, totally optional. Like keep it easy. Yep. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. And Hart was out there like riding the trails with his kids. Like that was his ride. Super easy, super fun, chill ride with his kids. I mean, that's like perfect. That's
like the ideal transition type of work. Just totally unstructured. Fun, low impact.
Yep.
Mindless. That kind of thing. Like that's it. And for some people, like to them, that blows their mind that that's going to help them do better later in the season.
Yeah.
But I, promise you, it'll make all the difference in the world. Later down the road. So like after that, like first, let's say 4 or 5 days, maybe a week, that's when like you could start to put back in consistency, I would say. If you're going for a second kind of transition week, that's where you kind of get back into doing a full week of training, but still pretty unstructured, low impact.
Low impact.
Yep. Like just to kind of get the
and
body.
fun. Like don't worry about stats. Like,
Yeah.
don't even worry about
Put the Garmin in the drawer.
Exactly. Don't worry about the stats.
I just blew people's mind by
Yeah.
saying this.
Yeah. Although, actually, make sure if you're one of our athletes that you're recording the data, so you're not out
Yeah.
there like doing group rides and
Yeah.
claiming it's
put the tape over there. Yeah.
yeah.
That happens a lot too. Is you get somebody on transition, and as the coach, you give them no structure, and they take that leash and they run to the end of it.
It's like, how'd you find more time to train than you did on our big weeks?
You put in a heck of a week on this transition week. So consistency first, and then this is also a good time to really focus on technique. Focus on, things that you will stop focusing on once you get back to doing kind of, the really structured training.
Yep. No, for sure. I think the biggest thing with this whole thing is like knowing that it's okay to take a week off.
Yeah.
Like if you've gotten to a point where your motivation's low, take a week off. Like if you're feeling burnout, like just take a week off. You'll be amazed at how you feel a few weeks after you come back. Once you kind of get that training going again, you'll be amazed at how much better you feel. So like if you're getting to a point where you're seeing fitness gains diminish, and you're working harder, and not seeing the benefit of that, well, there's probably a good chance that the body's just worn out, and that's a perfect time. If you have not planned out like a double peak or whatever, but you're going through this, take a week off. Don't stress about it. You're not going to lose a lot of fitness, and losing some fitness is fine. If it means you're clearing fatigue from the body, that's just allowing your body to come back stronger down the road. So don't stress about it. If you're there right now, take a week off, go to the lake, have some fun, maybe drink some beers. I don't know. Reset.
Sounds like a real life scenario, right?
We may be going to the lake this weekend.
Yeah, we're going to the lake this weekend. So, I mean, realistically, this is why we're talking about this right now, is because this is when it happens for most of our athletes. So, generally, it's one after a goal race, but also for folks that like don't necessarily have like big goal races. Like a lot of cyclists, they basically will race, and then when they like feel really fit, that's like when the goal races come in.
They'll keep looking for more races. Yeah.
But if you don't have goal races, it's usually somewhere around that like late May into June.
Yeah.
And it just so happens to coincide when your kids get out of school, summer vacations happen, Memorial Day, Father's Day weekend, lake vacations. So like it just kind of all culminates right around this time.
Yep.
So it just makes perfect sense to throw in that transition kind of right now, right?
Yep. Right.
I'm not telling everybody to just
abolish all training. Yes.
Stop your training this week.
And it's largely based around where you're at physically, mentally, the type of training you've been doing, how long you've been doing super structured stuff. If you've been doing super structured stuff for a long period of time, it wears on you. And get to that goal race, shut it down for a week, and you're going to find that you're going to be a much happier person, and you're going to be much stronger on the back half of the year.
Absolutely.
And as a random side note, like
love random side notes.
Random side note, this whole super structured training thing is what got me thinking about it. And I think we've touched on it before, but for a lot of folks that I've dealt with that, aren't, you're not a pro athlete that just has an abundant amount of time to train and rest and sleep and eat and do all that. Like 6 weeks of a ton of structure and like really focused intervals based around your goal event seems to be about max. Some can take it out to 8, but
yeah, I think there's a bit of a difference between structure and focused intervals.
Hyper focused.
Yeah, like that's where it gets people. It's when you start getting into the really hyper focused, high performance type. The
ones that hurt
intervals,
where you're like
where you're thinking about it all day long. Like it creates more stress because those workouts hurt. And they weigh on you more mentally.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So then, weeks on end of that puts a
And a lot of times you're not training with your friends anymore. You're off doing them by yourself because and the group rides kind of have to take a back seat for a while. And so just something to think about there as well.
And like, just to throw in this example, since we've been talking about it kind of off air here, Philip Young was a good example because we kind of, he did Ironman 70.3 Chattanooga, finished the race, gave him a week transition, and then we kind of got back on it. And then like, we're building up for nationals, USAT nationals in Cleveland. And so we kind of got back on his running because that's our main limiter focus on him right now is running. We got back on that pretty quickly. And I guess we've made it now, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And, this last weekend he went to the lake with some friends. And I think it came at like the perfect time because we weren't so far into like our build to nationals, but he got that extra
refresher, right?
Yeah, that extra little transition. Because I think the problem was when during his actual transition he was sick or like had work,
there was other life stress.
There was other stuff.
Whether it's
there was other life stuff in there that wasn't
or
really making it a true mental physical recovery.
So R&R.
Yeah.
Rest and
relaxation. There's nothing, I will say, shout out to Memphis Boat Center.
Shout out.
Nothing like heading out on the lake and throwing the phone in the cubby hole there and just chilling for a few days. So
it's going to be good.
That's where we'll be this weekend. If you're out on Pickwick, we'll be there.
Holler at us.
All right. I think that covers it.
Yep. We're pretty bad at following the questions and comments if there are any. I don't think there has been. But if you've posted any comments, we'll get to those afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll answer them. Or we'll answer them on the next show.
Cool.
All right, guys. We appreciate you hanging out, listening, watching. We will catch you guys next time. Adios.
Peace.